Politics stood on its head in the House this afternoon. Democrats trying to stop a debate on whether or not to impeach the vice president. Republicans desperately trying to keep the debate alive. Congressman and presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich stood up on the floor of the House to publicly call for what many of his colleagues privately believe, that the vice president should be impeached. Instead of supporting him, his fellow Democrats could not move quickly enough to bury his resolution. Kucinich charged Cheney with knowingly deceiving the American public about Iraq and WMD, about al-Qaeda's relationship with Saddam Hussein, and with having violated his oath to uphold the Constitution.
The vice president's deception upon the citizens and the Congress of the United States that enabled the failed United States invasion of Iraq forcibly altered the rules of diplomacy, such that the vice president's recent belligerent actions towards Iran are destabilizing and counterproductive to the national security of the United States.
From that, the House dissolved into political shambles. Majority Leader Mr. Hoyer quickly called for the tabling of the resolution, which prompted Republicans to call for a debate in order to force Democrats to lay out their position on impeachment, which then led to Democrats calling for the motion to go to committee, whence it was eventually buried this evening. Or was it? According to House procedure, Representative Kucinich could keep raising the impeachment resolution whenever he wants in the House because he introduced it in the form of a privileged resolution. Watch this space, as they say. Joining us now, Rachel Maddow, the host of the Rachel Maddow Show on Air America Radio. Good evening, Rachel.
Hi, Keith.
All right, who got this wrong? Kucinich for handing Dick Cheney and the Republicans some remarkably undeserved sympathy, or the Democratic leadership for quashing a discussion of whether we have a vice president unfit for office?
I think this is an easy one. I think it was the Democratic leadership screwing this one up. I don't know what genius political consultant has advised the Democratic leadership that it's a bad idea to spend hours of prime time on the floor of Congress reminding the country that Mr. 11% approval rating is a bad guy of whom they disapprove and who they would like to see held accountable. It's supposed to be Politics 101, that you associate yourself with good things and that you are seen to frequently and rapidly denounce bad things. I don't know what kind of weird Beltway consultant dictionary doesn't have a picture of Dick Cheney under the entry for bad things. It just seems like a real short-sighted move by the Democratic leadership.
Let me be the devil's advocate. I'm going to sound like about Cheney like Chuck Schumer about Mukasey. What about the scenario where you actually do this? You impeach Cheney, he's convicted and thrown out in 6 weeks, and Bush appoints his new vice president, Rudolph W. Giuliani or Willard Mitt Romney. What happens then?
Well, the reason you impeach somebody is not because you hate them or because they're a bad guy. You impeach somebody because you want to save their office, because you respect their office and you respect the Constitution that granted the powers to that office that exist. And so you impeach Cheney in order to stand up for the Constitution, not because you think he's a bad guy, though he is a very bad guy. And so whether it was Giuliani or Mitt Romney, or actually my pick, the president's brother, Jeb, who they would replace him with, I think that's what you have to swallow in order to stand up for the Constitution.
If the vice president is, as you pointed out, down to nearly single digits in the polls, and you're supposed to associate yourself with good things and stay away from the bad things, or at least you associate yourself with trying to correct the bad things, did the Republicans miss a chance here? What if Republicans impeach Cheney? You know, take out one of your own as a display.
It's so against their political DNA to go for accountability, but it is actually, if in the big picture, it would be a great opportunity for them, because not only could they have themselves a clean break with the Bush administration, which the country hates, but they could also set themselves up with an incumbent to run for president, which is why I always thought that they would retire Cheney somehow, if not impeach him, and bring Jeb up from Florida.
Yeah, well, there's still time.
Yeah.
Last thing here, after the tabling of the resolution, the White House accused Congress of wasting an afternoon, I guess, again, by even trying to talk about impeaching Cheney. But at some point in the future, again, at some point in our lives, are we going to see principles having to be addressed in a Mukasey case? The principle of a crazy vice president not just held over as political chess pieces by both sides for the next election?
Yeah, we really are. And I think that if you get outside kind of Beltway logic and you look at what's actually motivating people and inspiring people outside the Washington hive, you'll see that that stuff is really resonating. I mean, Ron Paul raised $4 million in one day yesterday as the anti-war, pro-Constitution Republican candidate. Chris Dodd got his first uptick in the polls among the Democratic candidates by saying he'd personally put a hold on the unconstitutional FISA idea. Fighting works politically. Substantively, it's right that we ought to be doing these things for the soul of the country. But politically, fighting on the big issues, on the war and the Constitution, works. And they're going to have to get out of these consultants' back-assward approaches to things in order to see this non-Beltway truth.
Rachel Maddow of Air America, as always, great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Keith.